follow-up questions, but hopefully today you can either use the chat or we'll have some time for questions, and we're going to be doing a couple of breakout sessions towards the end. But you can see the agenda here. The first part, we're really going to be talking about the teams themselves and other support services like employee and family resources. We got a brief video for you. We're talking a little bit about the need for peer support, the role of the peer supporter, calls for activations. So you kind of learn the infrastructure in a sense. And then in the second part, we're going to be talking about the peer support session itself. Now, I sent out on Friday 3 handouts, and hopefully you got them. One was what we call a cheat sheet. The second was the role of the peer supporter, and the third was frequently asked questions. And so those will be helpful just to kind of supplement what we're talking about today. So hopefully you got that. We will show the cheat sheet. That's going to be helpful when we get to the actual mock scenario practice sessions. But in that middle part, as you can see there, we're going to go over the stages of an actual peer support session: introduction, exploration, and information and education stage. We have a bunch of handouts. You'll hear all about that. And sometimes we do a relaxation exercise at the end. We'll explain that. And we have an actual video that we did that Mary Pat led us in. And so you'll see an actual video of an abbreviated peer support session given a simulation. We'll take a short break and then we'll come back and we'll do those 2 mock scenario practice sessions. So we're going to put you in breakout rooms into groups, and we'll explain that. So at the very end, we will just see if there's any last questions. We're going to talk about next steps. But let me just say ahead of time that, you know, taking the training, we appreciate you being here. We appreciate it.
Right onto Livingston Street.
And I'm going to mute everybody. Just to cut down the background noise. We appreciate your time taking this. Taking it does not automatically put you on a team. We are going to send out like a brief survey at the end, so you can tell us if you want to be on a team. You know, you're going to learn hopefully enough about it to know whether or not you want to join a team and how it all works. So please do ask us questions if you're not sure about anything. And you'll hear about all the different teams. We've got them across the system. So next slide. So let's see, I think Mary Pat is going to talk about this slide. Yes. You're going to have to unmute yourself, Mary Pat. There you go.
Yep, there we go. Okay, so originally, how was the Yale New Haven, at the time, Yale New Haven Hospital peer support team was formed? It was started in 2011 with Don Costa, who was one of our original team members, and from Protective Services, and myself. We had asked our director at the time for, you know, some kind of peer support for the staff, and she said, you know, we don't have any, but if you want to take the time to do the research, I'll grant you, you know, a certain amount of hours and see what you come up with. So, and at this time we had, you know, I think Bud had just come to Yale, and so it was a perfect combination, and we were led in a training. We trained 26 team members over at Sponsor Hospital in a 2-day training, and we started to do peer support for the ED and Protective Services, and then that lasted about a month, and then we were starting to go all over the whole hospital and offering peer support, and then to other campuses within, you know, the New Haven region. So the reason that we had asked for this team to be developed was that we had 2 coworkers that died suddenly back to back within about a month or 2 of each other. And one was a beloved night nurse who was always charged. She was like the mom to everybody on night shift, and she died suddenly of a brain issue. And then another one was a tech who everybody loved, who had just come back from Afghanistan, and he wound up committing suicide. So we found these things out when we were on shift. We all got called into the conference room. Everybody was given this news the first time, and people were crying, breaking down, had to go right back to shift. And I was like, oh God, how is this normal? How are we supposed to work in an emergency department when we're like emotionally wrecked and then provide care? And I just kind of thought it was a one-off. And then it happened again 2 months later with the young man. So that's what prompted us to start the team. And this video just kind of gives a brief synopsis of, you know, what the team does and why we're activated.
All right. We go to the next slide. We'll start that. Take a second for it to load. I'm just going to pause it. Everybody hear and see the video okay? Let me know in the chat if you cannot, or you can speak up. All right. Yes, thank you. Yes, very good.
We work with truly amazing people on a daily basis. Not only are they employees of Yale New Haven Hospital, but they are also mothers.
Oops, sorry, I don't know what happened there. Apologize for that.
We work with truly amazing people on a daily basis. Not only are they employees of Yale New Haven Hospital, but they are also mothers, fathers, spouses, and children of aging parents. Some of them have had a full day before they even got to work, yet they show up and put their best face forward for the patients every single day.
1, 2, 3.
Most days it's business as usual, but sometimes staff faces challenges. These moments are called extraordinary events and can be too much for one person to handle. They can happen suddenly and without warning and can put you over the edge. This is precisely where peer-to-peer support enters in. Critical incident stress management is just that, one coworker helping another. The diffusing process helps peers form appropriate concepts about stress reactions before false interpretations are formed. Each member of our team has been formally trained in crisis intervention to offer support to their coworkers. All of our debriefings and diffusings are completely confidential and voluntary. Participants are given the opportunity to verbalize stress.
Apologies. Every time I do something on the screen, it stops the video. I don't know why. Let me see if I can.
Achieving the goal of returning staff back to their work and family lives with a sense of closure and peace. Referrals to EFR can be made should the need arise for confidential counseling. It is important to understand that crisis intervention is not psychotherapy, but emotional first aid.
I think you will notice that you heard some terms used interchangeably. Peer support is what we refer to the teams now. When they were first formed, we used the Mitchell model, which serves EMS and fire and police for debriefing, and we were called the Critical Incident Stress Management Team, or CISM. And then when Yale went to plain language, we had to change the name. So I just wanted to explain why you still hear some old terminology. Thanks, Bud.
Thank you, Mary Pat. And you'll see.
This is also my slide, right?
Yes, this is your slide too, and I apologize for the, I just restarted a couple times. I think I need a producer for this, so maybe we'll do that next time. Go ahead, Mary Pat.
Yeah. Sure. So the teams have historically been activated for the following reasons, and our number one is patient death, especially on floors where patients have longer time, staff has longer time with patients, and they develop relationships or relationships with the family members. So patient death, death of a coworker, sadly, is another one that we're frequently activated for. A coworker's family member's death, tragic deaths of children, codes, be it bad codes, the ones that didn't go as well as people had hoped, COVID stress and PTSD, medication errors, unexpected patient outcomes, say somebody had a slip and fall. And I can remember one time recently, elderly patient got out of bed, the bed alarm didn't work, fell, hit his head, had a brain bleed, things like that. Physical, verbal, and sexual violence against staff. This is on the rise. You will see this in the next chart. And we're not really sure yet if it's because people are realizing that there's no tolerance for this at Yale anymore, so they're reporting it more, or patients and visitors are more angry and it's happening more. So, each one is very serious. And, difficult family members. They're not necessarily physically or verbally abusive, but they're just very, very difficult and stressful to deal with. So, and really the team can be activated for any event that has significant emotional power to overwhelm someone's usual coping mechanisms, because some of these things you could do over and over again and you're fine. And then there's that one day where it's just not fine and you need to talk to somebody, and that's where we come in. So this is a chart that shows exactly those reasons for activation that I just talked about. And you can see that during COVID, COVID started to take over and become, our highest one. But death of a patient is typically the reason we're activated the most. And then, but now the violence one, as you can see, the green lines are June of 2022 to May of 2023, and that one has taken on the number one effect. I know someone had asked if the black boxes.
We'll have to forge ahead. So we're going to have Chaplain Jess Somer join us when she can. She's in the middle of a meeting now, but she's one of the team leaders for the Lawrence Memorial and Westerly Hospital team, and they've also been in existence for a while. So when she can, she'll be on a little bit later to tell us about their team. They have a good history and core of folks who have been doing it for a while, and they're expanding it. So if there are people in that area who want to join that team, that would be, we're kind of do this geographically. All right, so the role of the peer support team member, this is, if you got the handouts, this is part of what's on the handout, role of support. I just wanted to kind of go over this quickly. So obviously we're responding to fellow employees who experience those kinds of incidents that Mary Pat talked about, okay? This is not, you're not expected to provide counseling or social work or therapy. This is emotional first aid or peer support. Okay, so keep that in mind. It's really just being there for people after they've gone through a somewhat, we call it a critical event or a traumatic event or something that's overwhelming. Being there, allowing them to listen, to talk, and you listen. Really, it's a lot of listening. It's a lot of validating and normalizing, and we're going to go through that a little bit later on. But the last point is pretty key. It's not to review or critique any medical or clinical or anything like that. It's really to just focus on the individual and how the event has affected us as people, as caregivers. So that's the point there. We meet as one-to-one or in small groups. This is done through the team. So you wouldn't be responding independently. You're providing emotional support, as I mentioned, not counseling or therapy. And it's to help process the emotional impact of the event. Normalizing, as I said, we usually go through, when people have these events, they feel it emotionally, but also physically, cognitively, and behaviorally. So there's actually a handout that talks about this that we'll show you the handouts later on. But those are some of the ways that we try to normalize it. In other words, we might say, look, maybe you're not sleeping as well, or maybe your digestion is off, or maybe you've got some irritability or tension or that kind of thing. Those are normal reactions. So that's part of what we normalize and point out towards the end of a session and also during a session. So we also don't want you to be responding to an event that you're affected by. So if there's an event in your department or you know the person involved or something like that, you wouldn't be expected to be the peer supporter leading a group or helping an individual. Okay, so you're the actual person needing support. So we don't want you to be involved in a situation that affects you emotionally. All right, now I'm going to start this, and then maybe Mary Pat, if maybe you can chime in if I get any of this wrong. But the stipends,
Okay.
important. Mary Pat and the Yale New Haven team set this up way back when they first started, and we are spreading it across the system because we don't want this to be a volunteer effort. So you do get a stipend. Here's how it works. So if you're hourly, you would not respond while on duty. You would respond off duty and while you're not clocked in. And when you do that, you would get a stipend of $150 for up to 4 hours. Now, it doesn't usually take 4 hours. I would say, Mary Pat, well, an hour or so, maybe some follow-up is the usual time frame. Would you agree with that?
Sure, I would agree with that. And it depends, too, we like to include your travel time, like you're going in on your off time. So it's basically like the 150 for the whole time that you're from when you left your house to go and etc. So, but mostly the activations themselves last 45 minutes, hour and a half for a really long one. But that's the average.
Yep, I'd agree with that.
Yeah. And so we do have a $300 thing if it's over 4 hours, just for, really kind of extraordinary kinds of things. I don't think we've ever done that. But we have set it up so that we can do this across the system. Although I have to say we've had some glitches setting it up. We're just about there. So we'll have a way that if you respond to a situation and you qualify for the stipend, we can send it into payroll and it would be added on to your paycheck. So just about there. If you're salaried, you could respond during your normal work hours if you have the flexibility and approval of your manager. So that's really key. And if you respond while off the clock as a hourly employee, then you would qualify for the stipend. But if you do respond while on the clock, you cannot get the stipend. If your manager is wondering, we have a central budget for this, so it doesn't come out of the department budget, it comes out of a central budget that we have for the system. So that's why it's kind of taken a little bit of time to set it up. All right, so at this point, let's see, we'll talk a little bit about just some basic things about the service that will provide information and education about. Obviously, the confidentiality is super, super important. Everything that we do within a session is confidential. There aren't any official notes taken. There's nothing of substance reported to anybody. We do collect numbers so that we can show how many people we've served, how many times we've responded across the system, team by team, but it is very confidential. You know, there's no names that we use. It's not, as I said, reported to anybody. We talk about expected common reactions to grief, loss, and trauma, things that we know that people, like I mentioned before, there are these behavioral, cognitive, emotional kinds of reactions that typically occur, and we point that out, so kind of tell people to expect that. And of course, we tell people about employee and family resources, and that's one of the reasons why Vivian and I are involved. And we dovetail our program, EFR, and the peer support really work together in this, because lots of times you'll be referring to EFR. So we are going to tell you a little bit later some specifics about the program, and we're always available if you want to get somebody connected to EFR. We also usually try to help people think about self-care practices after a session. You know, what are they going to do when they get home the next few days? How are they going to take care of themselves? How important that is to, you know, really recovering from an event. And that usually people do recover within a couple of days, maybe even quicker sometimes. And then if they don't, then sometimes what we say is, you know, if you're not recovering, sometimes this may trigger something else that you've been through, or it's something that critical to you or personal to you, and that may be the time to reach out to talk to somebody one-to-one. Now, you could do that with a peer supporter, but you can also do that through EFR or through other courses. As I mentioned, it is a team approach. So if you want to join, we'd be asking you to join a delivery network team. We'll show you the teams and how they break down in a few minutes, but there's teams at each major delivery network, and the requests for assistance go through to a team leader who assesses the need. I'm going to go through this quick because Mary Pat's going to talk in a kind of a flow chart how this works. The team leader assesses the need, coordinates the response, and then dispatches the team members through a system that we have set up for each team. We do provide training for, you know, this is one of the trainings that we do. We do some ongoing training at regular meetings. We try to really give, if you're new to this and want some support, we try to give you everything that we need to do that. Just wanted to put this slide up. This is something just to show you that 4 teams, Yale New Haven Hospital, which covers both campuses, Lawrence and Memorial, which also covers Westerly Hospital, and you know, really anything in that area. You see on the bottom there, we do include NEMG and HSC employees. Should have put that on the slide. Geographically, so they could be team members of one of those teams where they're located. They can also be served by one of the teams geographically. So we know there's lots of ambulatory settings and off-site from the main hospital campuses, so the teams can respond to those. And that's part of what we're trying to really develop as we go along here.
Yeah, somebody wanted to know afterwards about how many NEMG staff have participated in this training. So we can help follow up with that afterwards.
Yeah, off the top of my head, no, we've had some earlier trainings, and we've had a pretty fair number of NEMG employees do the training. I don't know that we have that many as team members. We do have some. I'm not sure how many team members we have. So we would definitely welcome and want to include NEMG and HSC employees.
Thank you for that. It's Carrie. I'm an NEMG employee and also a nurse. Yeah, I'm a nurse manager.
Okay. Yeah. And that's definitely important. We do want to be able to respond to those settings. We know things happen there as well, of course. So it'd be great to have people from those settings be team members, and to be connected there would be kind of a great extension of the network to all those places.
Yeah, and having you as a volunteer, if you decide to do that, will be good for getting the word out.
Okay. I look forward to seeing who, I'm sure I'm in good company, so I look forward to seeing who else has completed the training.
Yeah.
I'm an EMG too. I'm a practice supervisor in Guilford, so I'm
Oh,
excited.
hi,
Hopefully-
hi, Trisha.
Hi, Carrie. Excited to be part of
Yay.
it.
Yep, someone else said they're an EMG, so you got company.
Yes, very good company.
All right, so at this stage, I think Mary Pat is going to kind of run you through that protocol activation. Mary Pat, you there?
Thank you. Yeah, I just had to unmute myself. Yeah, so basically this kind of shows in a graph form or chart form what Bud was talking about, how to activate the team. So a manager, an APSM, a charge nurse, an OSCE, really anyone, any staff member could activate the team. You just have to identify that staff could benefit from peer support after what we call a situation is an extraordinary event. And then they contact for New Haven, the switchboard operator at 203-688-4242. And also our email is going live in July, so that will be another way to reach us as well. It'll be monitored Monday through Friday, 8 to 4, and then you could contact an OSCE if it was on the off shift, and then we would get back to you, the contact and arrange the meeting. So typically what happens is I field most of the calls. The page operator will text me or call me and give me the phone number of the manager or the person who requested the activation. And then I contact them and talk about, what the details are, what day would be best, what time. And I will say we're trying to move away from the now. We need an activation now, because that's more of a triage, right? Like, this thing just happens, everybody's overwhelmed, not really sure what's going on or what they're feeling. And so our team really isn't set up to handle that because for two reasons. One, people have, full-time jobs and full lives. And two, the research shows that the best results occur when a meeting is held 48 to 72 hours after an event. So people have time to process on their own, and then they can come and talk in the group, and then the real healing takes place. So you can go to the next slide, Bud. Oh, you are. So the team leader, I would then send through SmartWeb a text page, and it goes to 130 something people, and I say, what's available, what the time is, and then I ask them to text me back, and they do, and then I usually get 1 to 2 team members. Like I was just working on one a little bit ago, and we're going to have a senior staff member go on Friday morning, and a new member is going to go with him to shadow. And she's been to the training, she's done a couple mock scenarios, but now wants to just see it before she goes on her own. And that's how we train our new members. And then, so that's kind of the blue box, I just talked about that. And then the team leader confirms with the requesting person. I just close the loop that I will have such and such team members at your unit at such and such time. And it's worked pretty seamlessly for 11 years. So I know L&M and Westerly, they have a little bit of a different process because they use email only or word of mouth, but Jessica can speak to that when she joins us on the call.
All right, thanks, Mary Pat. So back in 2022, or early in 2022, we decided, really with the help from Workplace Violence Prevention Initiative, to expand. We had the 2 teams, but we wanted to really make this system-wide. So we had a subgroup put together. We had a lot of input, and we held some trainings. 3, there's actual, one of the trainings, there's a recording. You can find it on Thrive under the My Safety page. And this is a full day training where we had an outside presenter who is an expert, and Jerry Lewis is his name. And so if you want some more background, we do ask people if you have a chance to take a look at that. There's some different slides. There's some more content about the whole theory of this and how it's helpful, especially in healthcare. And as we know, I mean, we've all been through, quite difficult times since the pandemic, and we've just been through a lot. So we trained a lot of new people from all various disciplines. We still need people in other, a really comprehensive, well-rounded team would include lots of different roles from different departments and different shifts and from some of those off-site locations. So that's why I want to try to continue to do the trainings. And the more we publicize it, the more we get people like you who say they're interested. So we'll be probably doing this a couple times a year. And as I said, it's going to be recorded. So we'll put it up there on that same page, the My Safety page on Thrive. I did mention NEMG and HSC that we want to incorporate them, and definitely that's an important part of the whole system expansion and formation. So this gives you a little sense of the Yale New Haven. Mary Pat, you want to talk a little bit about this? This is a little dated, but just to give you a sense of the team composition. I see there's a question.
You're on mute.
Yeah. And I see there's a question, are there plans to extend this to the HCP, home care and hospice? They would be definitely welcome to join one of the main teams, and that's how we would do it. They would join one of the main teams for now, and if there was an event that occurred at one of their locations or to one of their people or teams, then that team in the geographic area would respond to it.
Pat, you're
Okay.
on mute,
Okay,
you
so,
must go
yep,
at the beginning.
sure. So our team and every team, we want it to be as diverse as possible because the peer support is for everybody. It's not just for nurse to nurse or doctors to doctors. This is for everybody that works together. We're all in the trenches together. So we want our groups to be as diverse and robust for the diffusing sessions as well as our team composition. So we have doctors, nurses, APPs, chaplains, social workers, PCAs or EDTAs, which in the emergency department, those are our technical assistants, managers, assistant managers. This is dated because it says OSE, not OSCE, and administrative, finance, some people IT, and then protective services. So it's gaps we've noticed. We'd like some more EVS, some more doctors, and we're always looking to grow the team because attrition happens. People move on. People decided like at one point in their career this worked for them, and then they got busier or changed jobs. So totally understand, but that's sort of the composition of our New Haven team.
Thank you, Mary Pat. And as I said, when we get Chaplain Jess Sommer on, she'll tell us a little bit more about their team. In the meantime, I think Vivian's going to talk a little bit about Bridgeport and Greenwich. Unless there's somebody, I don't know, I can't see all our participants at this point because I don't want to put those black squares on there. Is there anybody from Bridgeport or Greenwich who wants to talk a little bit about the team, or should Vivian do that?
Okay. Well, as Mary Pat and Bud said, these are fluid, the numbers. So sometimes it'll be more, say RNs, but we are trying to get people, as we said, from all walks of the hospital, because, we want the population to be, representative. And they started off November, and I have to say, Bridgeport has had some pretty challenging, but they have really done a great job, and they have found it very gratifying to help their peers. So they have really taken off. What's that noise?
We're getting a little bit of background noise. If you could mute yourselves, that'd be great. Thank you.
So anything more you want to know about Bridgeport, please, you can, chat or just let us know. But they've really taken off, and they're a great group. So I think Greenwich is also, they launched a little bit later, and they're working on getting the word out. Is there anyone here from Greenwich? I guess not. So you can see the team leaders, they're very dedicated, and they're doing a lot of advertising to get the word out. And, you know, it's taking some time, but the more we do, the more the word gets out. So they've been doing a good job. And I think that's it for the team members.
Okay, and just to let you know that we built in some things to provide support to new team members at the existing teams, which we've talked about, Yale New Haven and Lawrence and Memorial. Mary Pat mentioned shadow opportunities, so that's kind of how we're doing it there. There's more experienced team members on those teams, so they can take a newer person out who can shadow and be there and still support, but not have to be expected to lead a session or to jump right into it. But we do some mock debriefings. In fact, we decided that we might try like a system-wide mock debriefing or two. We'll do them in today's session, but we're also going to be continuing to do more, so that it gives you some chance to practice and get a sense of what goes on and just to increase your comfort level. We're always available, all of us are, to coach and consult as to prepare for an activation or after, to process how it went. That's also done at the team meetings, which are done. I think most of the teams are doing them bi-monthly at this point. And we do have a data collection system so that we can know how many activations, how many people were served, who of our team members went out to facilitate some of these. Mary Pat, you want to talk a little bit about the handouts that are available? Or we will talk about the later, but
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, and at the end of our sort of mock video that we did of a session, we show the folders and the go bag and the flyers, but I have some here. I keep some in a little folder of my own, that in case I'm activated and don't have time to grab the bag, I have copies of most of the important handouts, and then I can make copies when I get to the unit. But they're titled like "You Are Not Alone." This talks about some normal emotions after experiencing a tragedy, recovering from trauma and loss, finding meaning in trauma, how coworkers can be supportive, common reactions to traumatic stress, supporting someone who has a terminal illness, grief and loss, how can I help? There's a really great one that says 10 things not to say to me and to say when I have lost a loved one. There's really, really good things in there. And I like to hand those out and just leave them on the table. I don't force anyone to take them. And then, because I find people will come back in after and take it maybe when no one's looking, but sometimes people just like, yeah, I want all of them, and they take them. So people find them very helpful. And it does have the phone number for EFR on the bottom. And we always reference EFR support, for people who need it beyond the peer support meetings.
So there is a question: after today's training, will there be another training available before you go out to support someone? And yes, that's kind of what I was saying, is that there won't be another formal training, but in the team meetings, and then also we'll host another mock scenario, kind of a simulation that you can take part in. That'll be similar to what we do today, but so you'll get a few doses of that before you go out, so that you can start to feel comfortable.
And you go out, you can shadow with someone.
Yeah.
So that's important.
Yeah, that's what that's about. All right, so the other handouts that I sent some handouts before. If you didn't get those, let me know. Someone already has. I'm gonna try to get them to her later. But if you did not get the handouts, let me know. There's one called the role of the peer supporter. There's one called frequently asked questions, and there's a cheat sheet, which we'll show you. And if you didn't get the cheat sheet, you can actually take a phone photo. That might be one way to do it, before we go into the mock scenarios. That just kind of gives you you'll see that in a few. But yeah, we'll do everything we can to try to support you to get you to the place. We really want people who are willing to go out there and be engaged. So think about it. Think about, the one thing we haven't really, I don't think we've said outright, is that you don't have to go every single time. Obviously, you choose when you can go. If you've got something during that time when we need somebody, then you don't have to volunteer. But so we need enough people to be able to go at a particular time. So we usually need 2 people, maybe 3 tops, to go to a particular peer support session. So the more we have on the teams that are willing to participate, the better. So
And
let's see.
there may be some particular activation that you aren't comfortable with, and that's fine. That's true of people who've been doing it for years and years and years. If my mom just died and it's something about a death of somebody's mother, it may not be appropriate for me to go at that point. It may be too emotional, too close to home. So, we're not, like Bud said, you don't have to go out for every single one, or even if you're available, if it's not one that you're comfortable with.
So I see a couple of people didn't receive the handouts, so I sent them out on Friday. So if you might have registered after
Yeah.
that, or didn't get them.
But
out.
I'm sending them to Melissa and to Karen right now.
Oh, can you also send to
Ann Figura, Figora?
Oh, of course. Yep, I'll do it right now.
Can you also include Karen? I'm
Jubinek.
sorry. Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Karen Jubinek.
She wasn't on the
Got it.
element, but so great. Thank you very much. I can't do that while I got my screen up here live.
Right.
But I think we're at the point now where we're just kind of pause for a second, not as a break, but just to pause and see if anybody has any further questions about, and actually, what I'll do is I'll stop the share for now. Any questions about what we've covered so far about the teams, how they work, the role, what do you need to know? You can either use the chat or speak up.
Can I ask a question? How many requests do you typically receive weekly, or here at Yale New Haven Hospital? Is it a lot, or?
I can take that one, Bud. I would say it comes in waves. We do about 50 to 75 a year. So typically once a week. We're actually working with a unit right now that's having a very difficult patient situation. And so we did about 6 last week, and we're doing 2 more this week, and might keep doing 2 a week until this patient is placed in another hospital somewhere. So that's kind of an extreme example, but I would say that on average 1 a week. And then there's times where we don't get any, and then there's a month where we have 8, and those are usually like 1 month in the summer and 1 month around the holidays. So that we have like these 2 anchoring, more robust months, and then the rest are dribs and drabs.
And for
Great, thank
Bridgeport
you.
and Greenwich, I would say, they're relatively new teams. So Bridgeport has had more so far, and we're doing some publicity for those and just overall publicity for the team. So I think they're going to increase, but of course they're much smaller. So for those teams right now, they're pretty infrequent, but I think that's going to grow. The more people that get to know about this, and as we progress. So I see Karen, you have a hand up. Go ahead.
So I know this is a hospital initiative and seems like it's even funded by the hospital, but I can envision a lot of scenarios where people who are involved aren't necessarily hospital employees or even any NEMG. So it's the students, medical students, for example, are not employees at all. And most faculty and residents are university employees. So just sort of figuring out, and you wouldn't want to not include the physicians for
Right.
example, or the medical students in a lot of these. So how does that, how are some of the differences and especially in terms of like referring to the next step, which I think you referred to as EFR, but at the university would be EAP.
Good question.
Correct. Yeah. Well, first of all, the residents are employees of the health system. So
Correct.
they would qualify for EFR, but there may be people, like you said, we would not exclude them at all from any of the interventions that we do, so they could definitely participate. So we do have the contact number and information for the Yale University EAP. So they could be referred to that. So I think we have to get better at recognizing if there are people in the room that may not be under Yale New Haven Health, but be under the medical school or university. So, but yeah, we would definitely put them in touch with the EAP through the system there.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yep, thanks.
Great question.
And that program, by the way, is very similar in terms of what they provide. It's just a different provider, so and a different access phone number, a different website, but we would have that information. We probably should just get a handout on that and have that in the go bag so that we have it very, very much at our fingertips. But it's, I think, exactly the same. They provide, well, you'll hear about EFR in a few minutes, but it's a very, very similar set of services. Other questions? All right, let me bring this back up. And here's where we left off. And at this point, we're going to talk more about the session itself. And Vivian is going to be talking about, no, actually, I'm wrong. Apologize. Starting with the introduction, Mary Pat is going to talk a little bit about introducing a session and kind of some of the things that are talked about. This is on that cheat sheet that we referenced, so you'll get that.
Yeah, and one thing is that people, most of these are in person, and that's usually the preference, but sometimes it has been, obviously, particularly during the height of the pandemic, it was remote. So that's determined by the situation.
That's a good point. People are so comfortable and familiar with Zoom and Teams now that we do incorporate that. And in fact, there is another, on a different unit, there's a debriefing tonight, and there is going to be a Zoom option for people who are off today and that might also want to attend. So this is the cheat sheet. I know it kind of blurs it out on the camera, but it's laminated. They're in every go bag on the York Street campus and the St. Raphael's campus. This is one that I keep in my car in case I need it. Now, obviously, I know this thing by heart, but sometimes when I'm sitting down with a group of people that I've never met before, I still get nervous. Like every time I'm just like, oh boy. So I like to just have it in front of me so I can just glance down. And when I did, yes, thank you for showing that, Bud. And when I do the opener, if I forgot something, I can just kind of pepper it in throughout the session in an appropriate time or at the end before we close. One of the things I like to stress the most, as Bud mentioned earlier, is the confidentiality aspect. We're not here to do any kind of, you know, discovery work for a manager or report back that people were venting and saying, you know, blah, blah, blah. So I do say, like I would do in my practice as a nurse, that the only reason I would tell somebody else if somebody expressed that they wanted to hurt themselves or somebody else. So then, you know, we have to take it that step further. So this is a discussion. And I usually ask somebody if we could go around the room and introduce ourselves, just kind of as an icebreaker. And then I do ask somebody, I say, is there somebody in the room who feels comfortable just describing the timeline or the event that brought us all together here? And then just kind of wait a little bit. And there might be a little silence. And it might feel uncomfortable, but then somebody usually goes, okay, I'll talk. And then they get the ball rolling, and then somebody else talks. And then I just feel like, okay, my work is really over. I just came, facilitated this, and then the group becomes its own support system and it creates its own momentum. There are some exploration questions on the cheat sheet, which I think are helpful when, like I said, you can say, tell me what happened. You can ask someone, was that difficult for you? You can say, what reactions are people having now, or what's going through your mind now? Just some things to stimulate a conversation. And we're really there to listen and, let the participants do most of the talking. And I really do try to hesitate sharing my own experience unless it's like completely appropriate, because I don't want people to think I'm listening and then immediately talking about myself. I don't know if you've ever had that happen where you share something with somebody and then they make it about them. We don't want to do that. But sometimes there is a situation where it's appropriate because people feel like, oh, this happened to you too. Okay. But it's usually after all the sharing is done in the meeting. I always thank people for letting me come and help and listen. I always feel like it's an honor. And I have been blown away at learning what nurses and doctors and, techs or finance people go through in their jobs. I had no idea. I had no idea what it's like to work in another floor. I've been in the ED my whole career. And so when I hear what other people do, I'm like, wow, this hospital has a lot of incredible employees. So that's kind of how I open, and I use this cheat sheet all the time because it just helps me make sure that I do all the important stuff. Bud, can you go to the next slide?
Yeah.
I was just going to add a couple things to that.
Yeah.
That one of the things that I often don't say, what are your feelings? I like that to say, what are your reactions? Because it's a little less threatening. And some people don't like that feelings. And the other thing about, having them paint the picture of what happened is also so everybody's on the same page, because maybe if there was a death, somebody heard it the night before, maybe someone just heard it and they didn't hear this part of it. So it gets everybody on the same page. And the other piece of that exploration is normalizing and validating that everyone is going to have different reactions, varying reactions. No, there's no right or wrong. And, that it's understandable to have different reactions. So really that part of it is normalizing it and validating what they may be feeling, which is very important. And as Mary Pat said, this is another opportunity to talk about confidentiality too, because that's always something you can pepper in there. And the other part of this is obviously the people here on this call, on this training, are people who feel empathetic, or you wouldn't be here. And that's what we really need, is to, you don't have to be an expert, but the ability to empathize and accept the experiences of others without judgment is really the key to being in this role. And also very important is empathizing with yourself. You're not going to do everything perfectly. None of us do. And as Mary Pat said, I still use the cheat sheet too. And I've been doing this, for years and years, because it's, it's emotional. So it helps ground you and make sure you cover the new things. So by being empathetic and people knowing that, you're giving them an environment where they're going to want to share. So you can go to the next slide. So active listening is one of the skills that's going to obviously help people share in a safe environment. And so again, it's really, a lot of times when we're listening to people, we're thinking about what we're going to say next. So really sitting back and listening to them is very important. And as you know, sometimes people say something, but underneath is another message, and trying to listen to what that message is underneath. you know, for instance, I'll give you an example. I was recently meeting with an employee who was really upset about her job, felt that there were a lot of things going on that weren't right. And, you know, very angry and frustrated. But I said to her, oh, this must be disappointing, or is it disappointing? And, you know, that was the kind of key to go underneath the complaining to see what she really was feeling. So, but as Mary Pat said, really listening is our biggest job. So the next slide, please. Thank you. So again, we're not there to investigate or determine what people did was right or wrong. We're there to give everyone an opportunity to talk about what happened, support one another, because that's the most important thing, understand what they might be feeling, and also know resources available. So the kind of things like maintaining eye contact, is keeping your arms, hands open, you know, probably not making facial expressions that might be found difficult for the people. And this one, thoughts and feelings are to be believed, supported, and respected. It's not a forum where we challenge anybody about what they feel, or we try to fix it, because I think that's a big issue that people have. We want to make them feel better. We want to fix it. We want them to feel better. But if this kind of incident has happened, they're not necessarily going to feel better, but they are going to feel better about being heard and sharing with each other. So you don't have to fix this. So that's a very important part of it. Next one. So reflective listening is really just, you know, feeding back what you might be hearing. So in your own style, you know, everybody has their own style. So you might say, what I hear you saying is, or I'm getting the sense that, or it feels as though you, so you're just reflecting back what you believe you've heard. And the other people in the room are also having the opportunity to have that reflected back. So that's very important. And just to make sure that you are hearing and everybody's hearing the same thing and understanding it. And sometimes people will jump in and say, no, I think she said this or she meant that. And that's good, because they're supporting each other. And sometimes there's silence, and that's fine. The leader and the participants sometimes may be uncomfortable with the silence, but silence is good because it gives everyone an opportunity to maybe reflect for a minute. And also it gives them an opportunity just to maybe say something that they're thinking of and they haven't said it yet. So silence is not a bad thing. What you're really doing is you're giving space for people to talk, and silence is part of that. So I believe the next one is for Bud and Mary Pat.
Yep. Yeah. So I'll start, Mary Pat, and you can jump in if you like. So this is really the closing stage of a session where we're beginning to wrap things up. You might wonder, you know, how do you know that? You can just sort of sense it. The exploration phase begins to sort of wind down. You just kind of get a sense of the timing is right to begin telling them about some of these things that they need to know. And the information and education stage is the last stage. One of the key points is that, you know, stress reactions, we're all different. You know, we all handle stress differently. Some of us just let it roll off our shoulders, and some of us really internalize it. And there's no right or wrong, so they may or may not happen. As I mentioned before, we point out common reactions. There is a particular handout that points out some of these that you may be experiencing: physical, behavioral, cognitive, or emotional reactions, which are normal reactions to an extraordinary event. So kind of what we're saying to people is that there's nothing wrong with you. You're a strong, resilient person. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't be in healthcare, you know. You've been through a lot. There's nothing wrong with you, but you're having that maybe a little bit of an an overwhelm from this particular incident. And then that's to be expected because you're a person, you're human. And these are normal reactions. And so that's okay. And it's okay to reach out for help. Those kinds of messages are, I think, are good to give in this. Mary Pat mentioned a couple times about grief and loss. A lot, probably half, if not more, of the interventions are related to grief and loss. And so maybe talking a little bit about that. So you might want to educate yourself a little bit about it, or at least look at some of the handouts that we have. We can get those to you. But it's helpful to talk a little bit about grief. I mean, even just main points like everybody grieves differently. Some of us hold it in. We don't want to talk. It's helpful to talk for some of us. Try to get a sense of what is best for you and most helpful for you. What we're kind of doing in this stage is getting them to think about what are they going to do when they leave today from this session? How are they going to take care of themselves? Who are they going to talk to? Are they going to reach out to EFR? And so we do talk quite a bit about employee and family resources and what to expect if they call. We'll show you those slides in a few minutes so you can see those. But then you can go into a bunch of things of taking care of yourself. Stress management, self-care, those kinds of things are super important. And sometimes we kind of say to ourselves, I just need to go home and veg and, I don't know, binge Netflix or something like that. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But you might just give them some other ideas to think about that might be helpful to, maybe take a vigorous walk with somebody and talk about it or not. But basically the idea that, what works for you to kind of like offload some of the stuff. So whatever, there could be a number of things. Mary Pat, I know you often have a lot of great suggestions for this. What do you recommend for
Sure. I do like to bring up to the fact that maybe some people might be drinking alcohol after something happens, and I was like, totally understandable. But if you find that you're doing it like weeks after or months and or you're not going to the gym anymore, or you don't like to walk your dog, or if this in the acute phase, if that's what you use to get through a day or two or something, that's totally understandable and healthy. But if you find that it's going on, that's when I say the EFR piece, that there are professional counselors that can help you get to, the root cause of what's going on. So I don't want to like shame anybody in the acute after period, but just try to plant a seed that lets them know that if it's going on and it's interfering with your daily life or your relationships, that there is more help out there.
Yeah, I also wanted to add about, I often tell people too that, there's a part of the handout is what you can tell your family, because sometimes family members don't understand because they don't live in that environment. And I've had people say, oh, my mother's going to say, I told you not to go into that field, things like that. So you have to pick and choose who you share with that's going to give you what you need and what you can tell them that helps you. So that's part of it too, because they do go home to their families often, or not, they go home alone, and that is another issue, that they maybe feel isolated and how can they reach out. So everybody's different.
So kind of being assertive for your needs and doing what you can to take care of yourself is important. So this is a cheat sheet again on the next slide. Hopefully everybody got it. Thanks, Mary Pat, for sending those out to some who haven't. But if you haven't, you can always take a photo of this. But this, it does give the sense that this is a structured approach, and it is. We give you this to sort of have a way to think about following through these stages of a peer support session. We used to call it diffusing, debriefing, sort of interchangeable terms. You might just call it a peer support session, but usually it doesn't feel so structured or regimented when you do this. I'll say that much, right? I mean, it flows. It usually flows. I love what you said, Mary Pat, before about you go through the introduction, you set up the exploration. Once you get people talking, your job is almost done. You really just have to facilitate them talking. And every once in a while, things will come up. We'll show you a video of where, people can sometimes get sidetracked the discussion or talk a little bit too much about maybe the organization, what they should or shouldn't be doing, things like that. And so your job is to kind of keep people focused in on what are our individual reactions and what can we do to take care of ourselves and validate those, and then, get into the information and education phase. So the next is that with the handouts, we talked about these. Mary Pat mentioned them before, but do you want any questions about this, or Mary Pat, do you want to go over this in any more detail, or?
I think that at the end of the mock scenario video, it shows the bag and the folders.
Oh, right.
If anybody has any more questions about, different topics of the sheets or anything like that, and when you join a team as well, we can email you electronically these sheets as well, and then people can take a look at them that way too.
All right, so we're going to tell you a little bit about EFR, but again, I'll pause and just see if there's any questions, because it is important for you to know about EFR in that education phase. We want you to understand what it's about, so because you're kind of letting people know that it's a resource that they can use. But any questions about the anatomy of a peer support session at this point? Oh yeah, we hadn't heard from Jess yet. We're waiting for Chaplain Jess to join us. Has she joined yet? Guess not.
I haven't seen her, so.
Okay.
The black box is, oh, there we go. It's good. It's good now.
Yeah, when I open up the chat, I think that's one of the things that causes the black box. It's gone now?
Yes. Well, it's a little one, but the big one went. Yeah.
Okay.
Fine.
I'm sorry, I don't know why it does that. So, so let's go over EFR. You may know some of this stuff, but it's important to know it pretty thoroughly. The services are actually provided by an outside company. It is the same with the university and the medical schools. For us, it's Carillon Behavioral Health, which used to be called Beacon Health Options. It's the same company. They changed their name. And all employees, all of their dependent family and household members are eligible to use the program. It doesn't matter if you're full-time, part-time, or even per diem or casual. Any of those people and their family members and household members can call the number that you see there, the toll-free number, to access services. 24/7, 365 access, no cost, and the biggest thing is that it is confidential. What I often explain about that part of it is that since it's an outside company, it's not Yale New Haven Health System company, it's an outside company. Their records are very separate. They're protected by HIPAA and all other federal and state regulations regarding mental health and substance abuse records. So nothing can come back by law to us. We can't get information. We don't get names. Nothing goes into my chart or Epic or anything like that. So that is important to point out. For people will often have questions about that. And then on the next slide, I think Vivian's going to talk about the next one. Go ahead, Vivian.
So there's the number, as Bud said, it's 24/7. So you can call anytime, which is really great. And there is a new portal, and I don't know if this has been updated yet with the new name, but this will still work if you want to go.
Yeah, it still does.
Yeah, My Beacon Wellbeing, and you can do it via, without talking to someone. And some people prefer to do that. And there's also Talkspace is another service we have, which you can do some of your counseling by texting. So that is another option for people. And it's up to 6 free visits. And this is important. It's per year from when you start, per problem. So not that we want you to have more than one problem, of course, but say you had a work problem and then 6 months later you had a problem in a relationship, it's a separate problem. So the clock would start again. Of course, we have in person, we have an office right across the street from the main Yale New Haven Health Hospital. And so people can go to that, but there's also, we have affiliates throughout the whole state of Connecticut, and you can also get an affiliate in another state. Say you have a daughter who's going to college in another state or what have you. That's also something that can be arranged. So you have the option of telehealth or phone or video, and all the people are vetted, of course, and they're experienced and have all the proper credentials. Easy access, you just call. That's it. You don't have to go into a lot of detail. You're an employee, you're looking to do the counseling. You say whether you want to do it by phone or in person or video, and in person, where do you want to go? That's it. And again, it's completely confidential. We're bound by the guidelines around confidentiality. And that's a little picture of our office across from the emergency department at the Yale New Haven Health Hospital on York Street. So any questions about that? The other thing is, if for any reason you or a person that you refer contacts us and there's any kind of glitch, we hope that there won't be, but occasionally there might be. So Bud or myself can intervene to make sure that that person gets what they need. And we encourage you to contact one of us if that's the case. So that pretty much describes the counseling component.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, Vivian. We have a direct connection to Carolyn Behavioral Health. We have two very good contact people that we can talk to if there is any sort of barrier that a person experiences. The mental health system is overloaded still, and so sometimes it's not as easy as it should be to get connected, or you're just not getting an appointment that meets your needs. So if you're talking to somebody who's gone through your peer support session and they come back to you and say, look, I tried to call, but it's not working for me, that's when please let Vivian or myself know. We can troubleshoot it and get Carolyn involved quickly. They're very good at rectifying a situation. They do direct outreach. They'll do, like, for example, they'll do an active appointment search. So if a person's having trouble connecting with a counselor for some reason, they will actually start actively searching for an appointment that meets that employee's needs for time and day, and we all have different schedules, so they're good at that. So let us know if there's a problem. That's really key. Just so you know, there's more services, and this is also the same with the Yale University Medical School program as well. Work-life resources and referrals have to do with, as you can see, childcare, elder care, all sorts of travel, recreation, home services, even pet care. So you can call. And what I like to say is that, we all go to Google to find resources for ourselves and our family, but they do the legwork for you. They have very good databases that they can check out. If you call up and say, I'm looking for a very specific thing for my kid in middle school this summer who's into singing or something like that, I mean, they'll really go to work and search out, do the legwork for you. So a quick phone call from you will get them activated to do those kinds of searches for any of these reasons. And that includes legal and financial. You get a free initial consultation for financial or legal. For the legal part, you can qualify for discounted legal fees after the initial consultation if you use that attorney within the network. So pretty good overall services. And then we also do critical incident debriefing. So just so you know, we kind of have a two-layered approach that the peer support teams have been so wonderful in being able to provide that. nothing more valuable than having a peer who really understands what it's like to be there. But sometimes we work together. Sometimes a manager will call us in separately. When our counselors are called in, the only difference is that there's somebody from the outside. They have been trained. They have been specifically trained in this critical incident response. They are a licensed mental health professional when they go in. So, we can have a two-pronged approach at times from EFR and peer support. But so, as I said, we do work very much together. All right.
Can I ask about a follow-up question on that? So when you say we very much work together and it's a collaborative approach, does that mean that this overlaps, or what do you mean by, how does that look and feel how would that play out?
So sometimes it could be where peer support responds initially and they find that either an individual is referred to EFR, so there's that obvious connection. But sometimes the peer support will then ask us to go in at a later time as a follow-up service. And so one of our counselors may go to do a session or even just to go to a staff meeting and tell more about EFR. So that's one way it happens. Another way is that if an event is, say, large enough or serious enough, sometimes both of us are involved, coordinated, but both of us may be involved. We had a situation not too long ago where we both responded to the same event. And so that's another way that we can work together. But we often attend, Vivian and myself, attend the peer support regular team meetings so that people get familiar with us on the teams and they can use us as a resource as well, as we mentioned. So, Vivian, anything to add? I might have forgotten.
No, I was just going to add that sometimes people, just because they've used us before, they'll just call us again. So it's the knowledge of our program. And, of course, we're trying to get the word out about peer support so they know there's more than one resource.
The other thing I'll add to that is the Bridgeport and the Greenwich teams are relatively new. So if, for example, they were unable to respond to something, they just didn't have anybody available, the manager or anybody involved could call EFR directly. It doesn't have to go through Vivian or myself. You can call the EFR number, that 877 number that you see there, and you can request for a counselor to be dispatched. Now that's usually, same kind of response times. Usually it's like next day or within 2 days. Occasionally there's a same day request. If it's a same day request, it needs to be put in sort of earlier in the day. But we have had counselors dispatched, in the evenings, later at night, on the weekends. So what happens is Carillon has a whole network of counselors that have been trained. And so if the request goes into Carillon, they do their search. They try to find somebody who can respond at that particular time. And then that person is connected to the department requesting the services, and they go from there.
Yeah, Carillon also connects with an organization that only does critical incidents.
Right.
So that's their whole expertise. So sometimes they use them too.
I think something.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something to that because I think it's a good question. And I could see us really working together when you said, what does that see, and feel like? Say there was a mass casualty incident or something that affected many units in the hospital, like we would do what we could if we weren't affected as peer supporters, but we would call in EFR and, the professional support, because it would be many boots on the ground, probably more than we have. So I think that would work really nicely. Hope we never have to do that, but I could see that being a situation where we would need that.
Right. Does a referral to Carillon have to originate from a specific incident where peer support has been set up? No. A referral to Carillon can be made for any reason. We encourage you just to let people know, if you have a coworker or a teammate or somebody that that's going through a hard time, they could avail themselves of peer support, but they could also call EFR for any reason. Off the top of my head, I'm trying to remember, but the biggest two reasons that people call our program is related to stress and anxiety.
And relationships is another.
Relationships and family kinds of concerns are probably the second large category. So for any reason, and I like what Vivian pointed out, just to clarify. So let's say a person goes to EFR after a critical incident, like you're in a peer support session and they go because they've been, this reminds them of a loss that they've previously gone through. So then maybe they have 3 sessions or something like that and to talk to somebody. But then 6 months down the line, something else happens and, in a relationship or something totally unrelated, they can use EFR again, starting fresh with 6 sessions because it's a unique problem. Okay, so it's kind of good to know.
And anybody in the household can use it, and it doesn't matter what kind of insurance they have. We did say that, but some people, they may have no insurance, and that's fine. Maybe it's something where we can help them get some kind of insurance too.
All right, so sometimes at the end of a session, you can do a relaxation exercise. Mary Pat, you want to talk a little bit about this, how you use this?
Sure. I like to end the meeting with just a simple breathing exercise. I just ask people to put both feet on the ground and close their eyes, and we just breathe in and out slowly for about 60 seconds as a way to allow your body to come, your mind and your heart to come back to your body and get prepared to go close this session that we just had, sharing about these events that were difficult or upsetting. And then we slowly put our, professional persona back on and go out and do what we do. So I find it a nice transition. And then we all, just open our eyes and thank each other for being there and go back to our jobs.
Do you want to do it, Mary Pat?
I would love to, but I think, do we have time or should we go to the video?
Oh, we do have the video, right? Maybe afterwards.
Well, let's go to the video and then keep that in mind, because when we get to the practice sessions, the mock scenarios, there might be something you want to think about in your breakout rooms and if you're not, it's really not that difficult to lead an exercise like this. As Mary Pat said, just focus on some deep breathing, feel your body in the chair, feet on the floor. Just take a minute to decompress. And basically what we're helping people do is come out of the fight or flight mode, just to relax the mind and the body a little bit before they go back. So.
And I always like to let, that it takes courage to come and sit and talk about these things and to give them that, that feedback. Right.
Good point. All right. So we do have a video and we'll try not to interrupt it. This one is a little bit longer. It will give you a taste of what it's like in a debriefing. As you can see, Vivian and I are participants. Mary Pat is leading the session. I hope the volume is up enough. Let's see how it goes. I do see okay, I've got a question here. I'll have to respond to you separately, but may not be able to do that. But let's start the video. After the video, we'll take a 10-minute break. What time is it? We're doing pretty good on time, I think. And then we'll go into the mock scenarios. So here we go.
All right, so welcome everyone. My name is Mary Pat. I'm one of the peer support members, and manager of this unit asked me to meet with you guys. I want to just give a couple of disclaimers before we get started. I am not a professional psychologist or social worker. I am here as peer-to-peer. I work in the hospital just like you. I know we all have different roles, but it was explained to me that you guys have been through an extraordinary event that's been difficult to process, and this meeting is a chance for you to do that. A couple of things business things I like to get out of the way is that everything that's said here stays here. It's confidential. The only reason I would say something to somebody is if you talked about hurting yourself or somebody else, right? Just like we would do with a patient. So just know that I do not go back to management. I do not report anything that's said. You're free to express any kinds of thoughts or emotions that you need to. Also, we do work closely with EFR, and at the end, if anybody feels they would like to utilize the free counseling sessions that we have through EFR, I'll give you information on that.
So we need counseling already?
No,
What's AFR, by the way?
that is actually a really good question. I'm not
What's the
saying,
counseling, aren't you upset?
I know, that's,
No, we need to fix things around here. That's what we need to do.
you're right.
Counseling.
We're not here for that.
Yeah.
We're here to talk about-
These are actually very good points, and I can address those as we move on. But I will say that EFR is Employee and Family Resources, and that's through Yale. There's a whole department, and they do offer confidential counseling, and it's free. But we'll get to that at the end. You don't have to do it. Let's just put that.
Well, that's
Nobody's
good that
making you do
They
it.
have that, yeah.
I won't record any names of people that are here unless you want me to contact you for follow-up, and I don't record anything that you say, just some brief data points about why and what unit it was and the date, okay? What else we can do is kind of go around the room and introduce ourselves to break the ice. And my name is Mary Pat. I'm a nurse in the ED, and I've been on the peer support team for 10 years. Would you like to start?
I'm Officer Pelletier. I've been with New Haven for 2 years, State Police for 25 years previously.
Okay, thank you. Hi.
Hi, my name is Hannah, and I am an RN, and I've been an RN on this floor for about 2 years, and overall 10 years.
Okay, great, thank you, Hannah.
Yeah, and I'm Bob, and I'm a PCA. I knew him really well. It sucks, you know, so.
Yeah.
Been here for a while. I got to know him, and it's just not right. It's just wrong.
Okay,
What's going on?
thanks, Bob. And what's your name?
My name's Vivian, and I'm in the VA, and you know, everybody sees, and I've been there for 3 months. Well, every time I see his family, they're just really, really, really nice people. And, you know, he was such a good patient. He didn't call me all the time like some of them. I can't get over this.
Okay. I do have some tissues if anybody wants to share those. And if anybody needs a snack, management's got some sandwiches and juice. Please help yourself, and the bathrooms are outside if you need to use those, okay, and get some fresh air. I was only told that there was a poor outcome for a patient. I don't get a lot of details, and your manager asked me to come. I was wondering if somebody would like to open up and kind of fill us all in on the events, and then other people can join in and give their, view of what happened. Do I have a?
I don't know what happened. That's the problem.
Okay.
He was waiting for, he was delayed in receiving his dialysis. So
Okay.
I don't know anything else.
Okay.
Yeah, I only heard the outcome after the fact. I mean, I did what we do on a daily basis. Somebody comes in, requested by nurses to do a safety check, and that's only to make sure they haven't brought in any kind of unauthorized medication, any kind of weapon, stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
It's a basic check. It's not invasive at all. This guy was very willing to tell us whatever he had. We didn't see any signs that something would happen.
Mm-hmm.
So we were done within probably 30, 40 seconds, and then released him off to the nurse. And then I heard maybe, honestly, I don't know what time. At some point later, I heard what had occurred, how he had left the hospital, and they got hit.
What do you mean hit?
Well, yeah, you didn't know?
No, I didn't know that. Is he gonna be all right? Do we know his prognosis?
Do you want to expound on that?
I-
What do you mean by
I don't know,
it?
somebody told me he ran onto the street, got hit by a car,
Okay.
but
It's because we had to wait so long. Everything's so short-staffed, we're running on empty here, and they're not giving us any help. Everybody here did exactly what they're supposed to be doing, but it's, system's messed up. We've been working like crazy for the last couple of years through the pandemic,
Yes.
and now this happens, and it wouldn't have happened, it shouldn't have happened to this guy. So, I mean, that's what we gotta fix. We need more people.
Yes, that is a common reaction I hear as I respond to units around the hospital. How do you feel, or what are your thoughts about this specific event that happened?
Oh, I feel terrible for him. He was a great guy, like
He
you said, and he was a great patient. He was getting better, and this just shouldn't have happened. It's having to wait for that, and he got all messed up and stumbled out into the road.
It's terrible.
We should have caught him.
This reminds me of what happened to my brother.
Vivian, do you want to share about what happened?
No,
You
I
said
don't.
you knew the family?
Oh, yeah, the family, they were lovely. They really were. They were, well, you knew them. They were,
Totally.
just nice people. They weren't demanding, they didn't give us trouble, Nowadays, so many of them do. They were just, and he was just such a nice man. I came here to get better.
You better be all right.
How old was he?
I think he was about 32.
Okay, so a
Yeah.
younger patient.
Yeah, which makes it even worse.
Yeah, totally.
Hannah, I noticed you were kind of quiet. I didn't know if you wanted to add any details or any thoughts that you're having about the situation.
Not really sure what to say. I just know.
I'm going to redo that because I'm never going to say, I noticed you were quiet. Take two. Okay, so Vivian, how old was the patient?
I think he was like 32, young man, really, young, had a lot of his life left. Praying he comes out of this.
Yeah, that's an extra layer.
Just
when
can't
it's a
keep
young-
on living with all this pain around me. I'm just tired of it.
Yes,
He didn't deserve that.
no,
Did not.
No, he didn't.
that does
You
not.
come to a hospital to get better.
Makes me so mad. I mean, this shouldn't have happened. Shouldn't have.
No, definitely a lot of.
What are we gonna do? I mean, they're sitting around talking about it isn't really gonna help. We need to do something. We need to let the bigwigs figure this out and say, do something different.
Who's supporting the family?
I don't have those details, but I know that I was asked to help support you guys as staff that were affected by this situation. And one thing that's important to know is that we don't try to fix things. I know you want something fixed, Bob, and that's absolutely, there's something that needs to be fixed here, but we're here to let you talk about what's going on and just get these thoughts and feelings out so they don't stay stuck in your head and get in the way of your normal functioning and activities that you like to do in your life. So definitely
It is getting in the way.
hear and acknowledge what you guys are saying. Did you say your name was Hannah?
It is.
And how did you know the patient?
I was the nurse taking care of him that day.
Okay. And have you been taking care of him for a long time? Or?
Well, he had been on our floor for a while. It wasn't the first time that I had taken care of him. I know other nurses have had him more often than I have, but it wasn't my first day.
Okay. And were you here the day that he was hit by the car?
I was his nurse that day.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry to hear that.
Killed us all, totally.
Devastating. It's just too much.
Couldn't believe it when we heard it.
Yeah.
All right, can I say something?
Of course, sure.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So, everyone here has their emotional connection, correct?
Yeah.
So, our job, we have no emotions.
Mm-hmm.
We have no connection to the patient. We do what we're told, we comply with our guidelines and whatever the policies are, and then we move on.
Mm-hmm.
And then if something happens to the patient, unfortunately in this situation, he gets away and gets hit, everybody turns and we're the bad guys. We didn't stop him. Why didn't we see the signs? Why don't we get out there and get him before he gets hit by the car? So we're never the good guys in all this. Right? And on this particular day, God knows where I was. I could have been in East Pavilion, West Pavilion, North Pavilion. I could have been handling another patient. But all of a sudden, everyone turns around because it's my area. Hey, how come you weren't there? How come you didn't stop him? How come you went up there and tell us that, hey, he was going to do this? See, everybody has their own little personal connection to it. I have no connection, but yet I get turned into the guy that he gets it because of me. And I think that's tough for a lot of our guys to handle. If we were there and we knew it, of course we would have stopped them.
Right.
But that's not what happens. And next thing you know, we're the bad guy. It's a rough thing to connect.
I don't blame you. I think it's the system. I think we need more help. It should never have happened for him to have to wait that long for dialysis. That whole thing was messed up. You know,
That's a nice guy. That family, it reminded me of my family.
Yeah, we can't turn our hearts off with our job, right? It's,
But it wasn't your fault.
No.
I hear that everybody here did their job and that you talk about, like,
It
the
didn't
Swiss
do any
cheese
good.
things.
It didn't do any
slip
good
through.
though. Don't you think?
I think it could have been stopped and prevented in the first place.
Hannah, you did a good job.
I don't know. No one's saying anything outright, but I can't help but feel guilty.
Why?
Just because I was working that day and he was my patient that day, and I feel a sense of responsibility for taking care of him. And it doesn't even matter that we were short-staffed. We're always short-staffed. We're always working under those conditions. But it doesn't make me feel less worried. And when I come to work each day, I think, am I gonna make a mistake?
I know, I've seen you the last 3 months, you do a great job, but I can imagine how it must feel.
Has anybody been able to visit him or talk to the family?
No, I'd like to talk to the family.
No, we're not allowed nice to do.
Oh, okay, all right.
I feel pretty powerless. What can we do?
And this happened 4 days ago, right?
Yeah.
4 days, I lost track of the time.
Has it been harder or easier as the days have gone on since this event?
I think it's harder because I haven't been sleeping.
Right. Thinking about it all the time.
Uh-huh,
And when I start thinking about it, I get madder.
right.
I worry about him, though, there hasn't been any changes.
Mhm.
You know? It's good if he got better, but it doesn't look hopeful.
You know, I get more depressed.
Well, it is really, I always feel this way, but it has been an honor to be here and listen to you guys and try to understand what it is that you do on a daily basis. And I really appreciate each and every one of you. And I do like to close with just about a minute of a breathing exercise. It's nothing spiritual, it's not prayer. I know I could see you getting a little, but it's just to bring ourselves back into our body before we go back out there and deal with everything that we deal with on a daily basis,
I
okay?
need a lot of breathing.
Okay, and
Well, thank
breathing.
you for your time, Mary Pat.
Well, you're welcome.
I really appreciate it.
Thanks, but still, we need to let somebody know that this has
Yes,
got to be changed.
That's a good point. I wanted to know if you're having trouble with your normal routine since this event happened, and you find that you're not interested in your dog, or going to the gym, or maybe the first couple of days it happened, you were having an extra glass of wine or something like that.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Right,
Yeah.
and that's normal, but if you find a month or 6 weeks from now that you're having
this is continuing and it's affecting your life or your relationships, there's help out there. Because that means that you're having, you know, difficulty processing it, and that's where professionals come in. And I have these flyers from EFR, and you can get 6 free counseling
I'll take
sessions.
one. I've heard good things about that.
Okay, and I have as well. I've used it myself, and I have no problem like letting people know that, like raising teenagers and working in the ER, I have needed this, and you can do it on Zoom now, and it just helps to process the situation and return to normal functioning, which is what we all want. Because, you know, I think we went into healthcare because we wanted to help people, but it's not without its emotional impact on us. So I'm also going to leave these flyers about some of the things with some tips that you guys talked about today on how to help yourself, how to help your coworkers, et cetera. So these are going to be here in your break room. You can access them anytime you want, or share them with your coworkers. And also, you guys are now your own support group because you share together and you can check in on each other and see how you're doing.
Well, Bob's in the same, you know, I talked to Bob and Heather, and, you know, now I'll see you in the hall maybe. So.
Yeah, you can say hi, how's it going? So if we just put our feet on the ground, sit in your chair, and yeah, get into a comfortable position. And yes, you can fold your arms if you want, or put your hands on your lap, and just close your eyes. And just follow the natural rhythm of your breath. And then we're going to do an inhale for a count of 4, and then an exhale for a count of 4. And we're going to do that for 1 minute. Okay? Starting now. Okay, now you can start to wiggle your toes or your fingers and gently open your eyes and notice that you're back in this room. And again, I thank you for joining me in this meeting, and I'll stick around if anybody wants to talk privately or meet up for coffee another time, but free to go back. You're welcome.
Yeah,
thank you for having me. Now you have the number and you can call us anytime, okay? Thank you, everyone. Yes, that's the EFR flyer.
That might help because you've been really upset.
All right. Well, just before we close and take a break and do our mock scenarios, does anybody have any questions? What did you think? Stop the share here. Hopefully you could hear that okay. I know it's a little bit muted. We were wearing masks and we did this. I think you recorded that with an iPhone, right, Mary Pat?
Yeah.
You get a general sense of what it was like for different participants with different kinds of reactions. What did you think? Any reactions? Or
Yeah, I thought it was very interesting, and there are some points where, as a facilitator of this conversation, it was interesting. The facilitator said not really step back, and there's that one point where someone said, "Oh, this should have been prevented," and instead of intervening in the conversation, the words came up, let the group support each other. And that was, I think, a really big lesson for me, at least looking at that, because as a facilitator and a manager, you know, you tend to want to like intervene and guide things along, but sitting back, I mean, clearly it was the right thing to do.
good observation. Yeah, absolutely. I played that part kind of because it doesn't always happen, but sometimes you'll get somebody in the group who's complaining about the way things ought to be and, you know, the systemic organizational issues. And just simply like she did, you know, you don't get caught up in that, you can acknowledge it, and you could even say something to the point of, I understand you might even feel a bit frustrated and angry because of that, because it happened and things aren't the way we want it to be. Because that's a normal, natural reaction to something like this.
What I could hear was, people blaming themselves, but I also see what often can happen is that in the situations where there's M&M or there's, other kinds of peer review of what happened, that is what happens. Not only do people blame themselves, but even though the peer review process is supposed to be not blaming people, it feels when someone's in that situation, they feel like they're being blamed. At least the physicians are, if they miss a diagnosis, if they don't order a certain kind of test or whatever, and then the patient goes home and they come back with a stroke or something, and everybody's like, well, you should have ordered the MRI. That will be part of the peer review process. So I think it's going to be hard in situations where people are being hard on themselves. But there really might be real consequences in terms of peer review or medical legal action.
Yeah, that's why in the beginning we're so clear about it not being that. But you're right, it can be a hard balancing act.
And another thing about that is that might call out the need to talk to that person one-to-one on the side and say, hey, look, you need some one-to-one support. We're here for you as peers, but also I can help connect you to EFR or some other resource. But kind of what we're doing in a session is trying to see who does need extra support. And, the nurse in that particular scenario, maybe she needed to, although she did open up finally at the end a little bit and you heard what she was feeling, but that's a good thing to follow up with. And Mary Pat mentioned that she would kind of hang and be there, if somebody wanted to talk one-to-one, that they're available for that too.
Yeah, I think the rest of, you may not have heard it, but I was assuring her that she did a good job. So that's really where the peer support comes in. And that usually does happen.
Yeah. But that is a good point. I mean, we can feel blamed, and that's even just to call that out or check it out and say, sometimes we feel that we're being scrutinized, or even, our own inner critic comes up. And that's a natural reaction to this. And because we like to get things right, maybe we're perfectionists and we want to make sure all the people we care for are properly cared for, but sometimes things go wrong. And so what can we do to help you? What's the next step? Other reactions, comments, thoughts?
There was somebody asked how many participants typically attend. So that's a good question.
I could answer this. I feel like most sessions have about a half a dozen people. There have been some where there's only one or two, and there have been, a handful that have had 15 or 20 people that have been, a very diverse group, because the situation lent itself to affecting a lot of people. So, but I would say for the most part, under 10, for these meetings.
And sometimes one-to-one. So that happens pretty regularly, with your team, right, Mary Pat? Good. So other questions before we give you a break? All right, well, let me, we're going to go into, after we're going to take a 10-minute break. And let me just kind of pull this up quickly, just to kind of give you something to think about. The first scenario, come on, here we go. Patient in mid-30s, male patient with a heart condition and diabetes, was a med-surg, coded, worked on him extensively, but he unfortunately died. And 2 young kids, wife and kids were there a lot. Staff got to know him and them. And he was there a week, sudden and unexpected, had, family oriented, had pictures of the kids, talked about them a lot. Wife was there a lot. So we're going to ask you when you come back from the break to think about, we're going to put you in breakout rooms. I think we have about 33, it looks like that's 30. So if we do even just 3 rooms, we need 2 people to volunteer to lead the session, to take, to try it out. And just, it doesn't have to be done perfectly, but sort of get an idea of what it's like. And the others can be actors in the roles, as you saw, like we did in the video. So think about that. Right?
I was in 2.
Excellent, great.
Worked out.
So let's just take a few minutes to kind of process what that was like. Let's open it up to, should we start with the facilitators? Who are, first of all, thank you for agreeing to try facilitating and leading a session. It's not easy to do in a first time, but it's not that hard, right? But I think you did a great job, the one I was in. So how about the facilitators? What did you think?
Well, for me, this, that was my first time, attempting to do that. I found it somewhat challenging, a little difficult, because I wanted to share what I was feeling, and I didn't feel like that would really be appropriate. So not trying to put myself in it to voice my, how I felt. So to me, it was a little challenging trying to just listen and not really say what I wanted to really say.
I think Rosemary and I think we partnered pretty well, Rosemary. So whatever I forgot, she remembered. So I think it was, it felt natural, except like Rosemary said, we did feel like for a while we were spinning. We were just keep saying the same thing over and over again, because we wanted to solve, but we knew that we weren't solve.
Yeah, both good points. We do want to try to solve things and fix things and make people feel better. And this is not so much about that. It's really about giving them the space to vent and share and all those things. And I think Kimberly mentioned, wanting to say how she felt. And you could acknowledge the other feelings, though, and as a way to saying, I hear you're feeling really sad and shocked about this. I get that. I mean, and this is really sudden and unexpected, some sort of just repeating like that.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if that was, we were supposed to do that, to say, again, whatever, again, kind of repeating back what they said and empathizing or sympathizing with that. So it's good to know that. I found myself just more or less coming from more of a standpoint of wanting to do the session correctly. And so looking at the cheat sheet and trying to make sure that it flowed properly and that I wasn't overstepping where I wasn't supposed to be. And so I asked a lot of questions of Mary Pat. She was great. And Stephanie was also a good partner leader. So, and it's hard to know where to wrap it up. Like when you think everybody's had their chance to talk.
Yeah, good point. And this is artificial, and it's not, you don't have a whole lot of time. So you want to get through the 3 phases in a quick period of time. But usually, to me, Vivian and Mary Pat can chime in. Usually it sort of winds down, you kind of go through and there may be somebody who hasn't said anything, and you don't have to say anything. You can even say that in the very beginning, you don't have to talk, but we invite you to talk, but you don't want to force people to talk. But as Mary Pat did a nice job in the video of saying to the nurse who hadn't talked yet, she asked her a question, what was your name and how were you involved? And that kind of got her going. So, other than that, it just sort of winds down. Things get a little quiet, usually.
Yeah, I would think almost everybody who goes to one of these sessions probably wants to speak, not always, but I do like the idea of making sure to invite those who may not feel comfortable speaking up right away.
And that came up with us too. There were two people really didn't say anything, and I'd asked Mary Pat, I said, so at this point, like one of the questions that I pulled from the cheat sheet was, what was the worst part of this for you? And so I asked her, would I reach out individually and say like, oh, Lynn, we haven't heard from you. What was the worst part for you? You don't have to talk if you don't want to, but blah, blah, blah. And so Mary Pat just encouraged that, yeah, you do want to make sure that everybody felt that they had the opportunity without having them feel forced, I guess.
I think it's in your approach rather sometimes than what you actually say, that your voice is empathetic and your body language is empathetic. They know you really care.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because like, I forget who said it, but wanting to make sure you cover the points and go through it correctly. Yeah, I mean, you'll get more comfortable with that, and it's good to have the cheat sheet there and make sure you cover things. But more importantly, it's just getting the sense that you're there to support them. And, your body language says that, how you intro and, just being there, being present and listening, it's all going to really help towards that feeling.
Right, because, you're also an employee, so they know. That's the good part about a peer support, is they know you work in the same environment, you have struggles too. You're not that there's anything wrong with someone who's professional by any means, but it does bring a different element to it.
Another thing I suggested in the group that we were in is, when you're not sure if you're ready to close down, but you could say, is there anything that we haven't touched on that somebody would like to say? And if nobody says anything, then you're ready to move on to the information and education phase. But somebody might say, yeah, I'm thinking about something, whatever. But
well, we also had a interesting question. One of our people in the group said, well, who's going to help the family? And we didn't, some of the people didn't know the answer. But what I was saying was, sometimes we don't know the answer, but we can get back to them, or we can talk to the manager and make sure the manager gives them that information. So we don't have to know everything.
That's a good point, Vivian. And I will say in the middle of a meeting, if they ask that, I will say, is that something you want me to relay to your manager, so I'm not breaking the confidentiality? Or I'll ask if there's a volunteer in the group that can follow up on that for the group, and then it takes me out of it.
Yeah, I like that's good with having someone volunteer. I like that.
Yeah.
How about some folks who were, go ahead, Kaylin.
This might go without saying, but I think the perceptions and the perceptives of each individual person in the group, and you might have a crazy emotional person, not crazy emotional, but hyper emotional, and then you have the clinical, very stoic person. And I guess that's where you kind of have to weigh the group and figure out what questions to ask and when to approach somebody and when to back off and just let them talk. So I think that's going to be the balance of that is going to be really important.
Mm-hmm. And a part of the educational part of that is saying, we all have different reactions. Some people will be more emotional, some people, or, also some people may feel this later on and not feel anything now. So, there's a good part to educate the differences in people and how they respond.
And there's no right or wrong way.
Right.
We're all different. Yeah.
I also think when you work with a group of people, when you first walk in, you have to take a step back to realize that different cultures react to things differently. You know, they see a situation and there could be 6 people there, and those 6 people all react differently. And it comes down to their beliefs and their cultures and what they're used to. Granted, their professional training does help them along the way, but when they face something that's emotional, that does strike them, they're going to react to who they are 9 out of 10 times.
It's a great point about the cultural aspect. Very important.
How about others who are participants as, receivers of peer support? What was the experience like? What did you think? Any comments, observations?
I think just kind of stepping back and playing one of the parts, it's just trying to get your rhythm of, this was a bit obviously new for all of us. So, there are phrases, there are things that, you as doing this for a while, you know what to say and kind of how to start to get the conversation going. I think that was, hard at first. And then, people started talking and asking questions, and then when to know to kind of have that active listening and be able to kind of repeat back what you've heard. I think, some of this to me is really kind of practicing to kind of bring that together.
That makes sense. True.
Yeah, and so I want to thank everybody who volunteered to lead a session, because it's, you don't really know what to say, and it's hard sometimes. So good comment here. Mic not working. I think the cheat sheet is excellent. What else was there? I have a feeling in-person meetings. Yeah, that's a good point. We're doing this on Zoom. You're not in the same room. It's definitely makes it a little more challenging. So yeah. Other comments from participants, or any other points that we haven't brought up like to bring out?
I thought the group that I was in did a good job of bringing up the kind of emotions you would have, like the self-blame and those kind of things, because it's so real.
And it came out in the group I was in about having kids similar ages and how you identify with them. And that was really, touching and kind of heartbreaking. And you can acknowledge that. You can say, yeah, that really, I could see how that would make you really be sad for them and make you extra sensitive with your own kids. All right. If there's nothing else, we have one more for you. And of course, we would encourage you to encourage some new people to facilitate. So let me bring this up and we'll show you the next scenario. All right, this one's a little bit different. Let me move this so we can see it better. Coworker died over the weekend, suddenly and unexpectedly, of a heart attack. She was in her early 50s. She was a nurse, worked in the ED for a long time. Everybody liked her, got along well, and knew her well. She was overweight, didn't take good care of herself, but she took care of everyone else and was a very upbeat person. Her husband was laid off last year and is working part-time in a different field. There was a rumor that he was a drinker. They have 3 kids, 2 daughters and a son, 15, 17, and 20. 20-year-old is in college, 17-year-old is going next year. She was close to all 3. She took care of an elderly father and had a lot of stress in her life. She seemed fine when you last saw her. Many coworkers knew her and her family well. The wake will be tomorrow and the funeral the next day. We're getting together for a diffusing or a peer support session. People are very shocked. Some just heard about it this morning. some knew about it for a day or so. So this one's a little different. Obviously, the part about the husband, lots of times we know some of this stuff about people's personal lives, so we put that in there to kind of add some complexity and flavor to it in a sense. So everybody got that down before I put you into your groups? Any questions? We still have 30 people, so we'll do 3 groups. Here we go.
Hi, I'd like to take my a shot at being one of the co-leaders, if that's okay.
Fine with me.
Okay, Alan.
Anybody
We're
else?
not together.
Have you got 2?
Not yet.
Who else would like to try?
Felicia, I saw your face.
We have some in the same group that were in the group number 3 last time.
I think this is mostly the same people.
Many, huh?
Yeah, I think it's the whole same group.
Yeah, it's the same
Oh,
group.
it
We
is.
had-
I thought it was more random. Maybe it just replicates it.
Yeah, I think it put us all in the same group. It's everyone.
Yeah.
Maybe Sarah? Sarah, are you there?
Yes, I'm still here. I actually can't run it right now because I'm also waiting on a phone call to come.
Well, again, thank you very much for those who volunteered to lead the session. Really, really appreciate you taking that risk and doing that and trying it out. It's let's open it up. We'd love to hear what your experience was like as a facilitator. What was it like to run a group? This is a difficult situation when you have a sudden unexpected death of a coworker who's all of a sudden not there and well liked and everything. So
I can start, Bud. I was just going to say, I think Melissa and I facilitated together, and this was a really hard one. I mean, because everybody talked about this was a coworker and worked with somebody every day, and there was a lot of emotion, and you could feel it as a facilitator. You felt the same emotion, so it was kind of hard, a lot to unpack and make sure that everybody had a chance to talk about it. And then one question that we got that I think, Vivian helped us with this a bit is, somebody asked, well, how are we all going to get there, to be at the funeral or the wake? And are they even going to let us do that? And, so our response was, that we would talk with leadership about that. But, we can't make promises. And so that was a little difficult.
They did a great job. Pros. Yeah, but that came up, and also what if somebody didn't feel up to working, like they really just felt, they could not do it. We talked about that too.
because all the emotions coming to the surface.
Right, yeah, that just couldn't think about going back on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
And then the same thing, you have to not make a promise. Well, you can do what you can go home or you can do this.
just
I
thought
mean,
of
when-
something. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say when the initial, one of the initial incidents happened back like in 2011 in our emergency department, and someone who was really core to the whole staff and was young and a single mom to 2 teenage boys. I mean, when she died unexpectedly, I mean, there was just, everybody was affected. I mean, and no one would have been able, I mean, in some ways, like no one felt like they could go to work for a while. And I'm not sure, you know, Mary Pat could speak more to this. I mean, I'm not sure how those who were even closer to her got through that because, you know, I mean, there's still a plaque in the wall in the emergency department of, you know, honoring her, that, you know, all of us pass every day. And when you, sometimes when you see it, you just get so sad, you know, 12 years later.
Right.
But, you know, Mary Pat, how did people go to work, you know, for weeks after, months after?
I know. And it was especially the night staff, right? Because she was
right,
forever a night nurse, and they were so greatly affected. And so I think they just soldiered on, but, you know, almost unhealthily, because it just, like, sometimes going back to work right away is helpful because then your other friends are there and you have each other and you can talk about it and stuff. But sometimes if you just keep like stuffing it, you know, then it definitely becomes unhealthy. And that's why those of us that didn't work directly with her on shift were able to take next steps to move forward towards, you know, this team and other things, you know, for the next time, because this time was just so devastating. It was like, this can't happen again. Like, we can't go through this again, you know? So, and I was, yeah.
Go ahead, Mary Pat. You had another point.
Yeah, that sometimes if you go to these sessions and they're very difficult for you as the leader, I've sometimes called Bud over the years and just been like, I need to debrief about this one. This one I'm carrying with me, because you're hearing a lot of people's thoughts and reactions and situations, and it might bring stuff up in your life or, you know, trigger some anxiety or feelings. So, you know, we've talked through a couple of times. So we're always, Bud and Vivian and I are always here for you as well. We're not expecting you to take on more than we already are. And if it becomes a burden or you need to talk, or there's the EFR sessions for us as well.
Right.
Yeah,
We talked
and-
about that too in the group. And and also because we don't know, other people may be coming to the group that just lost someone, or, you know what I mean? We don't know. We just see the tip of the iceberg of a person.
And I was going to say, and it was acknowledged in our group. I think Lisa brought it out, and again, great job by our facilitators in group 3. That grief is, because it was, you could feel it in the group. You guys did a good job acting it out, and that to acknowledge how grief can be, how it felt pretty lousy today. You might feel better tomorrow or the next week, or everybody's different. But so I think to point out in any situation that you might, today is how you're feeling, and that's natural, and it's kind of like you should be feeling that way. And if you're not feeling better in a couple of days, maybe you should reach out to talk to somebody, because this might be touching a deeper loss, something that you haven't dealt with from another loss, or this just might be too close to home because of your kids and their kids. And so maybe you really do need to talk to somebody about this. It doesn't hurt to kind of drive that point home, or to talk to somebody. Make sure you have somebody at home or somebody as a coworker who you can really talk to, and keep supporting one another, because this is a pretty heavy thing. And all of a sudden this loved coworker is gone. I was going to say, I lost my train of thought. There was something else I wanted to say about that. And then to think you can say at the end at some point, you know, and so, well, first of all, you didn't have any handouts. So you could use a handout. You could use a grief handout and point out some of the normal stages and some coping mechanisms. So that, you know, is good to do in a session like this. And you can also bring up the discussion about what are you going to do after this? How are you going to take care of yourself when you go home? Think of some ways, just to get them thinking about it. Maybe somebody even says, I'm just going to go for a long walk and just, or I'm going to go to a church and pray for her. Or I'm going to, whatever it might be, get them thinking about what are they going to do to take care of themselves? What's their plan?
And also some people were talked about, like they did a lot of things with this individual outside of work. So, they hung out with their kids. So, that brings up another whole element. They're not just losing a coworker, they're losing a friend that they do things with. And I don't know about the person in the ED that you're speaking about, but that came up in the group. So it's another whole level of loss.
Someone in our group brought the idea of, feeling bad for the kids and the family, and because the husband seemed a little unstable, and maybe we should set up a GoFundMe page, which was a really interesting idea. And how do you react to that as a facilitator? What do you say?
Well, yeah, you don't want to really say much. Let them, go with it.
But you could acknowledge it and say something like, what I'm hearing you say is you really feel you have the need to want to really help this family.
Right.
You can do something like that.
Yeah, because then also they talk about, a lot of things sometimes about memorials. And so, it's a good place to start thinking about that.
At the end of ours, I think Lisa brought it up too, that to take a moment, she didn't do a relaxation thing, but she did let's take a moment of reflection. And that's a good way to, kind of like, you could almost do like a moment of silence. I've done that sometimes in the beginning of a session. You don't have to say a moment of prayer. You can say a moment of silence just to honor her memory and, how you think about her, and, just take a moment for yourself to do that, to reflect on it.
Yeah, it's a very nice thing to do.
Yeah. Other last thoughts? We're getting near to the end. It's been a long afternoon, but any other thoughts from anybody as a participant or a facilitator in this last one?
I just had a question, just being like as a facilitator, and you guys alluded to like your teams and meetings and stuff like that. So like when you get assigned to go do a support intervention, like do you know who are you always teamed up? Is it single? Do you get to meet with that person before? Because I think that was like kind of where I was trying to with KL, and I said I always feel like I'm like, okay, I don't know if she's going to talk or I'm going to talk, and just kind of how you get that ebb and flow. Like do you get to prep, if you will, with your person or your co-facilitator ahead of time, or what how does that work?
So usually we don't. I'll assign, if there's two people and one is brand new, that person will be shadowing, and they'll just be there for support. Like say it was a larger group or and somebody had left the room crying or something, you could offer support and leave the room and help. But it really is like one person is the lead, and then the other person kind of peppers in maybe something that they missed or forgot, in the opening, and then can also chime in with directing the group. And I'll assign that, like when the two people respond to me and say, okay, I can go and I can go, then I send a text to those two people and say, this is the time, the date, the situation, or the background. I do like a mini S-bar, and I'll say this person's leading, this person is the co-lead. So, but like tonight, because somebody's shadowing for a 7 o'clock one, they're going to meet 15 minutes early in the atrium and just go over some things in the bag and show the rope. So if that's something you wanted, by all means, you could do that. Yeah.
But I think it does get a little bit easier once you do one or two and you've been with an experienced person, if you can, or if not, just going and doing it with somebody. It does help to kind of talk a little bit before the session and strategize about who's going to kind of lead and who's going to fill in the blanks and pepper in, as Mary Pat said. Use the cheat sheet. You know, it's hard to remember all this stuff. It's not super complicated, but this was a more complicated situation, and it was pretty emotional and heavy. So, you know, use that cheat sheet in a sense of trying to remember of how you're going to close this out. What would you like them to take from this? Oh, the other point I was going to make was sometimes like this kind of a session might not be best done in the middle of a shift. Maybe it's better if it can be arranged to be done at the end of a shift. And that way people don't have to go back to work. That's something that can be done, sometimes arranged that way.
But can I ask how, we've gotten the text before as the off shift of when that need is met. Is that what will happen if you're part of this group, of this training? Will we get a text message saying there's a need, or will it, like, how would you be notified that there's a need?
Yes, through text message, through the central paging system in the hospital, and you will register your phone. Sounds like it already is, but now you have to be registered to group. If you're in New Haven 8001, that's our group. And we'll send out, like if people decide to join the team and want to be part of it, we'll send instructions from Eric DeGeorge on just how to do that. And then the team lead for the New Haven team, either myself, Chris Chimmer, or Heather Tolosano, will send out a text. If you can do it, you respond back. If you can't, you just ignore it and go about your day.
Okay, and is there opportunity, I know that you'd said to sit in, is there opportunity to be able to observe prior to participating as a facilitator?
Yes, and we call it shadowing. And that's like, I have somebody shadowing tonight and somebody shadowing on Friday.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And it's not quite as easy to do that in the Bridgeport and the Greenwich groups because they're not as experienced, but is there anybody here who might be in one of those regions, Bridgeport or Greenwich, who might want to join that team? Okay. So, I mean, we were looking for kind of more experience to do that. And there are some people with some experience. They're not totally without experience. So, but that's why we wanted to give you a taste of this today, but also we'll do another mock scenario altogether. I don't know, maybe in a couple of weeks, we'll try to plan something. So if you can join that, you want a little more experience, that would be great. Lawrence and Memorial is a little different. They don't use a text message system. They feel they've always been small enough when they get a request, they communicate either just with each other or through email. They do have an email set up for somebody to request services, but between the team, they just sort of handle it themselves. So if you're out in that area, you know, you can see how they work. Bridgeport and Greenwich, I believe, will have the same texting system. So put out text, I think they put out a text and an email to see if you're interested in participating. And then once that is fulfilled, then there'll be another text or email to say, okay, we're all set.
So do I wait to find out? I have written to the leader here at LNM. I haven't heard back. Or do I wait to hear from your group?
So today, what we're going to do now is we're going to send out a survey saying, are you interested in being on the team? So there's a little bit of survey if you are, where you're located, all that kind of stuff. So logistical stuff. And so we'll ask you to send that back to us, and we'll connect you with the team where you're closest to. So you'll get a connection with one of the team leaders and be invited to the next team meeting, and you can just begin getting integrated that way.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, if you work in one area, but you live in another area, you could say which the other area, you know, whatever is going to make sense for you.
Yeah. And there's a question to me, is there a way we can get a printout of the slides? Yes, we're going to send out the slides to everyone. I'll put it up also on, well, I'll put it up on Thrive under the My Safety page. If you scroll down, there's a spot for peer support. So look there for updates. The list I have is from LMS, and I know there's a couple of other people who weren't on LMS, so make sure they get those as well. But if you weren't on the LMS registration, let me know to make sure that we can send you out the survey and the slides and that sort of thing. And we're available, Mary Pat, Vivian, and myself. We can put you in touch with the other team leaders if you want to check in with the other Bridgeport, Greenwich, or Lawrence or Memorial if you have questions of how those teams specifically work, but we can definitely connect you there. But any last questions? Anything else you need to know from us? Hopefully you'll consider joining the team. We could use you for sure. We really appreciate you coming today.
Yep.
Anything else?
Yeah, thank you for coming. I know it's a block of time, so we appreciate it.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank
All right.
you.
Well, have a great evening, everybody, and thanks for participating, and let us know if you have any further questions. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice
everybody.
day.